Pleasure to me all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. And now, what we got for today is another Steven Spielberg film. This one came out in 1977. This was basically another one of his well-known projects from this exact point in time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. For the record, this is a film that I've known about, I've heard about, and I have gotten to even see some portions of it in particular. But I never quite wanted to feel spoiled about it until I actually saw the movie itself, which I managed to do so a little while ago, thanks to renting it on YouTube. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977, Steven Spielberg, Universal, yada yada yada, is all finally fresh in my mind. Every possible bit of the original movie is now in my memory. So, it's time to get talking here. Close Encounters of the Third Kind specifically details the ideologies of visitors from space. Visitors in particular, whom are not seen as hostile or foreign by the rest of the world, but supposedly a means of wanting to simply integrate with each other, to simply get to see each other in person and allow for beneficial harmony of all sorts between different races. It's an idea that millions of people are very much looking forward to seeing in the future. I could never imagine millions of years from now there could be thousands of species that are basically intertwining with our own. There could be the likelihood that something might go wrong on their end or our end, and a war could ensue between the both of us. And that would not be a good thing at all. But what Close Encounters manages to accomplish is just simply the idea that visitors from space are indeed friendly. They only want to set foot on Earth as a means to explore the planet and to get to understand the people who live in it. It's the idea that a lot of people have actually been considering, but some are very skeptical even to this day. Are aliens really that hostile? Well, it's a question that even the likes of Stephen Hawking, for example, managed to simply compound on his own answer. He simply has beliefs on his own terms that aliens are likely to exist. Human contact with them, however, would be considered extremely dangerous. To that extent, I cannot simply trust the likes of millions of people here, because do we ever have any possible knowledge of how bad it would be to simply have contact with alien species from another world or even from another galaxy? It's very hard to tell exactly how that could possibly take place. Well, anyways, as we've seen before, Steven Spielberg simply has his own unique style in terms of creating films by allowing us to delve into other people's shoes. Case in point, Richard Dreyfuss, who was basically fresh off the set of Jaws, which in and of itself was another film that Universal was responsible for in 1975. But here, 2 years later in 1977, he simply gives us that nice unique vibe that he has: friendly, calm, yet determined and creative. He is in fact playing a father in this movie, the father of a family, whom in particular do not know anything about this exact alien species that he actually encounters at some point on the road, one particular night. A few police officers, who were also on duty, managed to chase this particular aircraft as well as a beam of light that were traveling above the road, hovering above it. For whatever reason, they wanted to find out exactly why this was happening and why these foreign objects, possibly from space, were traveling along American highways, just like that. So of course, it's all basically a build-up into the real big adventure that we've been looking for. Governmental discourse and a bunch of other good stuff that basically just delves into the real question: what exactly are these alien species, and how are they able to do stuff with our own planet? How were they able to make contact with us? How are they able to successfully allow for communication between themselves and our own kind? How are they allowed to go through the atmosphere without any sort of damage to their own crafts? Unlike in the cases that many of our own spacecrafts end up getting damaged at some degree during re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Of course, these are questions that have some answers in their own ways, but canonically speaking, you don't necessarily get to hear a whole lot about these things. But that's sort of the fun of it. The mystery that these alien creatures, these potential threats or potential friendly, honorable beings that come down to Earth, land on the surface, and walk out of the craft, simply have to do. But of course, here's the real big picture. The mothership. The gigantic object with a bunch of lights all over it that looms above a specialized military base, which was designed in the mountaintops, specifically for the spacecraft's own entry. If it ever wanted to touch down, then this is the exact spot that they would want it to land on. But before any of that happens though, a specialized synth sound is put together. A series of beeps, beep, 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 basically takes place. But what it actually is though, is straight up communication. The machinery that the aliens themselves have, and the machinery of our own, somehow communicate with one another with a specialized systemic process. A way of communication that we never quite found on our own, but you could probably think of it as a combination of Morse code and usage of notes on a music sheet that play harmonious music to each other. This is actually how the creatures are able to communicate with our own kind. And then of course there's the big moment. When the craft itself touches down, beings do in fact walk out of the door. A nice shining light. But of course what happens, the first beings to ever walk out of the craft are actually individuals whom were in fact trapped somewhere in time. It turns out that these creatures actually were responsible for abducting people of all kinds throughout history that had basically been stranded somewhere in the universe, light years away from Earth, and therefore traveling through time. If you remember when I talked about light year 2022, you know that if you're basically a huge distance away from your own planet, it is likely that you are bound to travel through time. What happens to you goes very quickly. If you go through Earth for millions of light years away and then come back, to you it might feel like maybe a couple minutes at most. But on Earth itself, decades could pass. In particular, these people that walk out of the craft itself have basically been through many decades in American history. They supposedly have been taken by these beings from another planet, another galaxy, or whatever, and they're basically coming home to Earth, to their loved ones and otherwise. For the very first time in a long time, these beings were basically doing a good service by giving back the people that they took away. They did the right thing. Instead of basically terrorizing humanity, these people were seen as friendly. The beings themselves actually walk out of the craft on their own too, so we get to see the first and only glimpse of the aliens themselves. This was of course before the likes of a lot of things. The Xenomorphs from Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien to say the least, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and then of course various James Cameron films and Aliens, and then of course there's Paul the Alien, and all that good stuff that happens. Even Crypto-137 from Destroy All Humans. So it's basically not like today where alien designs could be all over the place, or just those typical gray things with black eyes. No. This was a whole different concept. It didn't try to go through a bunch of stereotypes and plaster them on a giant screen for people to see. or even through today, which there are some instances where special editions get popped up all over the place. And in particular, this did have itself some behind the scenes footage, interviews with the cast and crew. Even Steven himself shows up at some point. But no matter which way you look at it, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is, simply put, an astonishing masterpiece that I never did get the chance to see. Unlike with other Steven Spielberg films like E.T., Jurassic Park, this was, in fact, one of those that had completely slipped my mind and my life. I never would have ever figured that I'd get the chance to see this finally, but here we are, pretty much. So how do I rate this compared to any other film I've seen? Well, in all honesty, I would probably have to give this one a good solid 8.5 out of 10.1. So, no matter what you probably would have to say about this, I really do like how this film was able to do something that other Alien films could never, ever do. So I suppose that pretty much just cuts everything out here, but if you want to see more, go down on my channel to make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.